This story begins when two men inherited the exact same thing, $10 million. No guidance, no instructions, just a sudden transfer large enough to bend the shape of a lifetime. 10 million a number that makes the mind go silent for a moment. The kind of silence where destiny seems to hold its breath. But here's the part no one expects. Only one of them stayed rich. The other watched the money melt away, not through disasters or bad luck, but through something quieter, deeper, far more human, the way he thought about money itself. You've probably met someone like Ethan before, the first man in our story. He was magnetic, impulsive, full of restless dreams and an almost desperate hunger to feel like he belonged in the world he admired from afar. To him, wealth was a spotlight, a stage, a chance to finally exhale and say, "Look at me now." He'd spent years scrolling past lives he couldn't afford, imagining the houses, the vacations, the nights filled with laughter and recognition. He didn't want money as much as he wanted the feeling of finally being enough. So when the inheritance landed in his account, a silent alert on his phone, at 10:14 a.m., he stared at the screen as if it were a doorway to a dream he never thought he'd touch. His throat tightened, his pulse raced. It felt like winning a war he hadn't been trained to fight. And in that moment, something inside him whispered that all the pain and pressure of the past had finally been repaid. Across the city, at a small wooden desk lit by a soft lamp, Marcus received the very same deposit. Same amount, same moment. But his reaction was nothing like Ethan's. Marcus didn't shout, didn't open shopping pages, didn't text anyone. He just stared at the number, almost motionless, as though absorbing the weight of responsibility rather than the thrill of possibility. For a long time he didn't move, and then, very slowly, he exhaled a single thought. What do I want this money to do for me? That one question would pull his life in a direction completely opposite from Ethan's. While Ethan spent that night scrolling luxury car sites with a drink in his hand, Marcus made tea and opened an old notebook he used for planning. At the top of a blank page he wrote two words with a steady hand: long-term freedom. Then he closed the book and went to bed early, letting the magnitude of the moment settle the way fresh soil settles around a seed. For Ethan, the money felt like fire, hot, thrilling, powerful, something he wanted to touch before it cooled. He couldn't sleep, his mind racing through visions of the life he'd been waiting to live: the house, the parties, the clothes, the validation. He felt as if the universe had finally given him permission to be the man he always pretended he was. For Marcus, the money felt like something entirely different: soil, rich, fertile soil he could plant something in, something that would grow if he treated it with patience and intention. He wasn't thinking about buying anything. He was thinking about time, how much of it he could reclaim, how much of it he could protect, how much of it he could ensure he never had to sell again. If you had seen the two men on the street that week, you wouldn't have guessed their paths were already splitting. They were the same age, both single, both living in modest apartments, both with families who had struggled in ways that left marks on their beliefs about money. But deep inside, they carried two different worlds. Ethan saw wealth as an escape. Marcus saw it as leverage. Within 48 hours, Ethan was stepping into glass-walled dealerships with a gleam in his eyes. Salespeople sensed him immediately, that intoxicating mix of excitement and vulnerability. They spoke to him like he was already part of a club he'd never been invited to before. "You only live once," one said. "A man like you deserves something special." The flattery landed perfectly. Every word fed the rush he was craving. During those same 48 hours, Marcus was sitting in front of his computer, reading quietly. He was learning about taxes, market cycles, diversification, risk, and the strange psychology of sudden wealth. He wasn't in a hurry. He wasn't trying to silence uncertainty with purchases. He was trying to understand the battlefield before taking a step onto it. The strange thing was this: both men were acting from emotion, not logic. Ethan's emotions pulled him outward into status, appearances, and the validation he had always longed for. Marcus's emotions pulled him inward into caution, curiosity, the need to protect what he had been given. Money, after all, doesn't change people, it amplifies who they already are. Ethan felt insecure, so he bought confidence. Marcus felt careful, so he sought clarity. And so, with the same $10 million sitting quietly in their accounts, the two men began drifting toward two completely different futures, not because of the money itself, but because of the stories they carried about what that money meant. Ethan wanted the world to see him. Marcus wanted the world to stop owning him. And that difference, subtle and invisible in the beginning, would grow into something vast. So this is where their journey starts. Two men standing at the same doorway, holding the same fortune, stepping into two diverging lives neither of them could yet imagine. The first months after the inheritance unfolded like two parallel movies, same starting frame, completely different scripts. Ethan's story opened with high volume excitement, the kind that feels like standing too close to fireworks. Marcus's story moved at the pace of a deep breath, steady and almost silent, like someone tracing the outline of a map before choosing a direction. For Ethan, the world had suddenly transformed into a showroom. Everything glowed, everything seduced him. He walked into luxury car dealerships with a swagger he didn't even realize he was imitating. The sales staff treated him like royalty, offering espresso in tiny cups, presenting glossy brochures filled with machines that promised power and admiration, and he soaked it all in. Every compliment, every "you seem like the kind of guy who appreciates quality," fed a part of him that had been starving for years. He chose a car, within days a sleek machine, polished to a mirror shine, one that roared when he touched the accelerator. It didn't matter that he barely knew the difference between horsepower and torque. What mattered was how it made him feel when he saw himself through the eyes of others. Successful, desirable, finally seen. He didn't think about insurance costs or property taxes on the penthouse he scheduled a viewing for, or the subtle expansion of lifestyle that comes with every upgrade. He was chasing a feeling, not managing a fortune. Nights became a blur of restaurants with soft lighting and loud bills. Friends he hadn't heard from in years reappeared with wide smiles and open hands. Ethan treated them all bottles, dinners, weekend trips, because generosity made him feel powerful. It made him feel safe, like the people around him truly cared. It also made him feel less alone with the weight of his own insecurity. Whenever someone raised an eyebrow at the way he spent, he waved them off. "It's fine," he said confidently. "I've got plenty." Meanwhile, across the city, Marcus was having a very different first month. His apartment remained the same. His routine barely shifted. He still made coffee in the same chipped mug, still walked to the same quiet park to think, still lived with the understanding that time moved the same speed no matter how much money sat in his bank account. But something had changed inside him. A quiet determination had begun to form, like the first roots of a tree pushing into the soil. He started meeting with financial advisors, 3 of them, to hear varied perspectives. He asked questions he once considered too naive to voice. He read books about behavior, risk, and long-term wealth, not the loud, flashy books, but the ones that talked about discipline, patience, and emotional control. Marcus wasn't looking for shortcuts, he was looking for foundations. At first he kept the inheritance a secret, not out of fear, but out of a respect for the money, for himself, for the life he wanted to build without noise. He told only one person, his older sister, who paused for a long time before whispering, "Please be careful. Money changes people." Marcus knew she was right, but he also believed money didn't have to change him. It could simply allow him to grow into who he already was. The contrast between the two men became more pronounced as the weeks went by. Ethan felt high euphoric living in a world he once believed belonged only to others. His new lifestyle demanded to be fed, and he fed it with enthusiasm. Every purchase was a hit of dopamine, every compliment a brief reassurance that he hadn't made a mistake. But beneath the excitement lived a quiet, creeping anxiety he didn't admit even to himself. What if this feeling didn't last? Marcus felt something entirely different. Not excitement, not fear, but clarity. He began visualizing his money like a river that could either flood recklessly or be channeled to irrigate the future. He created a simple plan. A portion into index funds, a portion into low-risk bonds, a small portion into ventures he wanted to learn about. And then he waited. He didn't need to touch the money to feel powerful. What empowered him was knowing he was building something that would outlast the initial thrill. If you had placed the two men side by side during those early months, the difference would have been almost invisible to the naked eye. Ethan looked like joy incarnate, laughing, dancing, buying, living out his fantasies with reckless freedom. Marcus looked like himself, quiet, thoughtful, unchanged on the surface. But beneath the surface, in the invisible architecture of their decisions, something irreversible was already taking shape. Because the truth is, people don't spend money, they spend emotions. Ethan wasn't buying cars and dinner. She was buying confidence, acceptance, and the illusion of stability. Marcus wasn't investing in funds and assets. He was investing in time, in peace, in the kind of life where he never had to feel trapped again. The world often confuses wealth with the appearance of wealth, but wealth is rarely loud. It whispers. It grows quietly, and sometimes it hides behind simple routines, coffee in a chipped mug, evenings with a notebook, long walks in a quiet park. So the first months passed, and the two men stood at the edges of two paths that had started at the same point, but already diverged more than either of them realized. Ethan was living in the present at full volume. Marcus was building a future in silence. And the gap between those two choices was only just beginning to widen. 1 year can pass quietly, or it can reveal everything someone tried not to see. For Ethan, the first year of wealth had been a breathtaking sprint, loud, glittering, intoxicating. But year one didn't end the way it began. The shine started to dim in little, almost invisible ways that only became obvious when placed side by side. Costs accumulated the way shadows lengthen at sunset, slowly at first, then all at once. His luxury car, once a symbol of triumph, had become a monthly reminder of expenses he never thought to calculate. Insurance bills stacked higher than he expected. Maintenance appointments were surprisingly frequent. Parking fees at high-end garages added up. And the penthouse he moved into, the property taxes alone, felt like a slap every quarter. But Ethan had grown used to his upgraded life. Downgrading felt like humiliation. Going back felt impossible. So he didn't think about the numbers. He simply paid the bills with a shrug, telling himself he'd figure it out later. He still had millions after all. That mentality, the belief that large numbers inherently meant safety, was the quiet trap tightening around him. Then there were the parties, the dinners, the weekend getaways he treated friends to. In the beginning, he loved being the guy who could pay for everything. He mistook the applause for affection. But over time, he noticed something small but painful. When he stopped paying, the laughter faded. The invitations slowed. People he thought were friends became distant the moment he wasn't their ticket to luxury. There was one night, around month 11, when this truth finally stung him. He had invited a group of friends to dinner, but didn't immediately grab the check like he usually did. For the first time in months, he hesitated. He simply sat there, waiting to see if someone else might offer. No one did. Instead, an awkward silence filled the table. A few exchanged glances. Someone joked lightly, "You good, man?" It was humour with an edge sharp enough to cut. Ethan forced a smile and paid, but the moment carved a deep, quiet wound inside him. The realisation that the relationships he built with money were fragile, conditional, and brittle as glass. Across the city, Marcus's first year looked nothing like Ethan's, but it was filled with its own subtle, emotional evolution. His investments had begun to grow slowly, predictably almost unnoticeable day to day, but obvious when he looked at the numbers in monthly intervals. He had learned to appreciate compounding, not just as a financial concept, but as a philosophy of life. Growth wasn't always visible, but it was always happening beneath the surface. He still worked his job, still lived modestly, still took long walks to think, but something inside him had quietly shifted. A sense of confidence rooted not in appearance but in stability. It wasn't an adrenaline rush like Ethan felt, more like the calm of putting both feet firmly on solid ground after years of uncertainty. He also learned something about trust. Not everyone he told about his inheritance reacted with joy for him. Some grew distant, a few became strangely competitive. Others tried to pitch him ideas, investments, shortcuts. Marcus realised that money didn't only reveal who he was, it revealed who the people around him were. And so, very carefully, he curated his circle. He chose to surround himself with people who valued him before the money existed, not after. 1 year after the inheritance, the contrast between the two men was sharper than ever. Ethan looked wealthier than he had ever looked in his life. Stylish clothes, high-end watch, the perfect Instagram feed. But beneath the surface, a knot of fear had begun to grow. He didn't talk about it, didn't even want to acknowledge it, but every time he logged into his account, he felt a small jolt of panic. The number was shrinking. Not dangerously yet, but noticeably. And once he noticed it, he couldn't unsee it. Marcus, on the other hand, still looked like his old self, simple, grounded, but the foundation of his life had become stronger than steel. His net worth had grown, his knowledge had expanded. His sense of direction was clearer. He started to understand that freedom didn't come from spending money, it came from controlling it. But the biggest difference between them wasn't visible on any bank statement. For Ethan, money had amplified his fears. Every purchase tasted a little less sweet. Every night out felt a little more hollow. Every friend seemed a little less sincere. He tried to buy the feeling of comfort again and again, but the comfort never lasted. He was chasing something that money couldn't fix, the emptiness he carried long before he was rich. For Marcus, money had amplified his values. Patience, curiosity, stability. He found meaning not in flexing, but in understanding. He felt grateful, not entitled. He treated the money as a partner, not a trophy. And that quiet emotional shift shaped every decision he made. By the end of the first year, the two men stood at very different emotional edges. Ethan was beginning to fear the future for the first time. Marcus was beginning to trust the future for the first time. Neither of them realised that the cracks in their paths, tiny as they seemed, would widen drastically in the years ahead. Because wealth isn't lost or built in a single moment. It's shaped slowly, almost invisibly, through choices rooted in emotion, long before they're expressed in numbers. And the next chapter of their journey, the third year, would pull that truth into the light with a force neither man could avoid. 3 years after the inheritance, the illusion that money could rewrite a person's identity began to crumble for Ethan. Not in a dramatic explosion, but in quiet, relentless ways of slow erosion he didn't notice until pieces of his life began falling off like bricks from a neglected wall. It started with the market turning downward. Nothing catastrophic at first, just a series of dips, small enough that people who understood money remained calm. But Ethan didn't understand money. He only understood the feeling of having it, the high of spending it, the comfort of believing that the number in his account would never stop being large. So when his remaining investments, The ones he had bought casually because someone at a party said they were hot began losing value, he panicked. He watched the red arrows on his trading app with a sickening drop in his stomach. Every day felt like watching sand slip through his fingers. He tried to sell at the right moments, but always sold too late. He tried to buy dips, but always bought too early. He was gambling with fear, and fear is the worst gambler of all. At the same time, the luxury items he owned, the car, the penthouse furniture, the designer clothes began to show their true nature. They weren't assets, they were anchors. Everything cost money to maintain. Everything depreciated. Even the expensive watch he believed would hold value was worth far less than he expected when he looked into selling it. It was as if the world was revealing a truth he had spent years trying not to look at. Money disappears fast when you use it to fill emotional holes. One morning, Ethan logged into his bank account and felt his throat tighten. The number he saw, still substantial by normal standards, terrified him. It was the lowest it had been since the inheritance, lower than he ever imagined it could fall. The past 3 years played like a montage in his head. The parties, the trips, the gifts to friends who were no longer around, the purchases that once felt like validation, but now felt like mistakes. He closed the laptop and sat in the silent penthouse, surrounded by everything he once believed would make him feel whole. Instead, he felt the sharpest loneliness of his life. Across the city, Marcus was experiencing a different third year entirely. His investments had not been immune to the market downturn, no portfolio is, but he wasn't afraid. He had prepared for it. He knew markets moved in cycles, and he had positioned himself so that downturns were opportunities, not threats. While Ethan panicked, Marcus stayed still. While Ethan sold, Marcus waited. While Ethan felt trapped, Marcus felt calm. He had learned enough by now to trust the long-term arc of disciplined investing. But more importantly, something profound had shifted inside him. He no longer saw money simply as freedom. He saw it as responsibility, a way to build something larger than himself. He began supporting small businesses in his community, not recklessly, but thoughtfully. He funded a scholarship for 2 students from his old neighborhood. He paid off his mother's mortgage quietly, without fanfare. These choices didn't come from guilt or obligation. They came from clarity, the clarity that wealth wasn't meant to be a spotlight like Ethan once believed. It was meant to be a lighthouse, something that guided, supported, and illuminated the path for others. While Marcus grew into this role with humility, Ethan shrank under the weight of the life he had built. The luxury he once flaunted now felt like a costume he could no longer afford. Friends who once cheered him on slowly drifted away when he stopped paying for everything. The parties he hosted became smaller, the invitations fewer, the silence louder. There was one night, the night the collapse became undeniable, when Ethan found himself in the penthouse living room, lights off, staring at the city through the floor-to-ceiling windows. He had a glass in his hand, but didn't drink it. He just stared, haunted by the reflection, looking back at him. He realized in a moment, painful enough to reorder his soul, that he had tried to buy the version of himself he wished he could be. But money, he finally understood, doesn't rewrite identity. It amplifies it. He whispered to the empty room, "What have I done?" That question echoed in the glass, in the silence, in the hollow spaces where friends once laughed. For the first time, he allowed himself to admit the truth. He wasn't in control. He never had been. And yet in that same moment, something else flickered inside him. Something small, fragile, but honest. Awareness. The kind that comes only after the ego collapses. The kind that hurts enough to force a change. As Ethan stared at the skyline, Marcus at that very same hour was sitting at a modest kitchen table, looking over his portfolio. Not obsessively, not anxiously, just reviewing, reflecting. He smiled softly, not because he was rich, but because he had learned the discipline to stay steady through storms. 2 men, Same inheritance, same city, same night. One was experiencing collapse, the other clarity. Neither knew that their paths were about to intersect again and change both of their futures in ways they didn't expect. 5 years after the inheritance, the distance between Ethan and Marcus had stretched into something vast, not just in money, but in identity, in humility, in peace. By now, their lives didn't look like two versions of the same starting point. They looked like two completely different species of experience. For Ethan, the descent had not been sudden. It had been slow, humiliating, and painfully ordinary. The kind of unraveling that doesn't make headlines, but eats a person from the inside out. The first thing he had to let go of was the penthouse. He told people it was a smart financial decision, a choice to diversify living arrangements, but the truth was simple and brutal. He couldn't afford the property taxes anymore. He sold it at a loss, not a catastrophic one, but enough to sting, enough to embarrass him, enough to make him realize that prestige is easy to buy, but nearly impossible to maintain. He moved into a smaller place, not tiny, but normal, human-sized. He told himself it wasn't a big deal, but the first night there, surrounded by boxes he packed alone, he sat on the edge of a mattress and felt a weight he hadn't felt since his 20s, the weight of being nobody special. His car went next. He traded it for something practical, something he once swore he'd never be seen driving. The dealership offered him far less than he expected. Luxury depreciates fast, and desperation is obvious. When he walked out of the dealership, keys to a modest sedan in hand, he felt a knot in his stomach, not because of the car, but because of the truth it represented. The life he had lived for 5 years was never truly his. He had borrowed it, and now repayment day had come. But there was something else, something unexpected growing quietly inside him. Humility. He began noticing things he had ignored for years. The value of $1, the weight of a bill, the depth of a genuine friend, the hollowness of people who once clung to him. He learned to cook at home. He learned to check his accounts daily. He learned to say no. And slowly, painfully, he began to confront the version of himself who believed money could heal the insecurity he never admitted he carried. Across the city, Marcus's life had expanded, but not in the ways one might think. His net worth had multiplied. Yes, patiently, steadily, predictably, but that wasn't the transformation that defined him. The real growth was internal, a deeper understanding of what wealth could mean when used intentionally. He funded education programs in his old neighborhood. He invested in a local startup that hired underprivileged teens. He bought a small building, not to flaunt, but to rent affordably to families struggling like his had once struggled. Every decision he made seemed to ripple outward, helping more lives than his own. He still lived simply, not out of fear, out of preference. His home was warm, welcoming, filled with plants and books and the smell of coffee in the morning. He had no desire for extravagance. Freedom was his luxury. Peace was his status symbol. It was during this 5th year, unexpectedly, that the two men crossed paths again. It happened one evening at a quiet cafe on the east side of the city. Ethan had stopped there after work. Yes, work. He had taken a job again, not in shame, but in necessity, an act that humbled him more than he ever expected. He was sipping a simple black coffee when he noticed Marcus at a corner table, reading, the same calm expression he had always carried. For a moment, Ethan hesitated. He felt a surge of embarrassment, a fear that Marcus would see him as a failure. The last time they spoke, Ethan had been riding high, bragging about cars and trips and connections. Now, he felt small, exposed, but Marcus looked up, saw him, and smiled warm, genuine, without a trace of condescension. He stood, walked over, and hugged him. Ethan didn't expect that. It disarmed him completely. They sat together, and for a long moment neither spoke. The cafe buzzed quietly around them, but the table felt suspended in time. Finally, Ethan cleared his throat. "I made a mess of it," he admitted. His voice cracked. "Yeah, I thought money would make me someone else." Marcus nodded softly. "Most people do." "How did you?" Ethan gestured helplessly, not finishing the sentence. "How did you succeed? How did you stay calm? How did you not lose yourself?" Marcus took a deep breath. His answer wasn't rehearsed. It wasn't grand. It was simple, honest, and filled with the clarity of 5 quiet years. "I stopped thinking about what money could buy," he said, "and started thinking about what it could build. I stopped trying to impress people who didn't care about me. I thought about my future self more than my present ego." He paused, choosing his next words carefully. "And I learned that wealth is just the slow accumulation of good decisions, one after another. Boring, patient, consistent." Ethan stared at his hands. "I didn't make any of those." Marcus shook his head gently. "You made the ones you were ready for then. Now you get to make different ones." There was no judgment in his voice, only compassion. Ethan felt something loosen in his chest. It was the first time in years he didn't feel ashamed sitting in front of someone who knew the truth. They talked for over an hour, not about money, but about fear, expectations, childhood, pressure, freedom. And when they finally stood to leave, Ethan felt something unfamiliar but profoundly relieving. Hope. Not the reckless hope that came with $10 million, but a quieter, steadier hope, the kind that comes from accepting responsibility. 5 years after the inheritance, their lives had split apart, but in that small cafe, their paths touched once more, and for Ethan, it was the beginning of something he didn't yet know how to name. Not wealth, not success, not redemption, direction. 10 years is long enough for a life to change completely. For both men, the decade after the inheritance reshaped them not into versions they expected, but into the men they were always meant to become. Wealth had not made them, choices had, and those choices, multiplied over thousands of days, produced 2 destinies that could not have been more different. Ethan, 10 years older now, looked nothing like the man who once strutted through luxury dealerships with a glass of champagne in his hand. His life had become simpler, quieter, grounded in ways he once would have mocked. He lived in a modest duplex outside the city, not poor, not struggling, but real, a life woven together by responsibility instead of adrenaline. He had rebuilt himself slowly, the way someone rebuilds a house after a storm, brick by brick, lesson by lesson. The collapse of his wealth didn't end him. It humbled him. It forced him to face the emptiness he had tried to bury beneath luxury and noise. For the first time, he learned how to stand without the crutches of validation. He started budgeting, saving, planning. He didn't have millions anymore, not even close, but he had control, real control. When he looked at his bank account, he didn't feel panic. He felt awareness. He felt ownership, he felt adulthood, and perhaps most importantly, he began repairing his relationships, not with gifts, not with parties, but with presence. The people who remained in his life now were the ones who had stayed after the money was gone. They didn't cheer for his lifestyle. They cared about his character. One evening, Ethan found himself walking home after dinner with an old friend. The air was cool, the street quiet, the world simple, and as he looked up at the sky, he realized something that would have shocked the younger version of himself. He was happier now. Happier with less. Happier with himself. Across the city, in a peaceful neighborhood with trees lining the streets, Marcus was finishing paperwork in his home office. Not glamorous paperwork. Not urgent paperwork. Just the quiet, steady tasks that came with running a foundation, managing investments, and overseeing projects that had grown far beyond what he imagined 10 years earlier. Marcus had become wealthy, truly wealthy, not because of the inheritance, but because of the discipline it awakened in him. His investments had doubled and doubled again. Some years were slow, some years were explosive, but he never chased, never gambled, never let money become louder than his principles. His home reflected him perfectly, understated but beautiful. Art on the walls from local creators he'd supported. A small reading nook, plants thriving in every corner. It wasn't the home of a show-off. It was the home of a man who had built a life aligned with his values. He didn't wake up thinking about money anymore. Wealth had become the background of his life, not the definition of it. His days were filled with purpose mentoring young entrepreneurs, funding community centres, helping his mother travel for the first time in her life. Money didn't elevate him, it gave him the platform to elevate others. One afternoon, a letter arrived in his mailbox. It was handwritten, something rare in a world obsessed with the digital noise. He recognised the handwriting immediately. Ethan. They hadn't drifted apart after reconnecting 5 years earlier. Their paths had remained separate, but their respect for each other had grown, forged by honesty rather than circumstance. Marcus opened the letter carefully. It wasn't long, it wasn't poetic, it was simply true. Thank you, not for saving my money, for helping me save myself. Marcus smiled, small, warm, deeply human. The kind of smile that comes from witnessing someone's redemption, not financially, but emotionally. Later that week, the two men met for lunch at a small family-owned restaurant. No luxury, no pretense, just two lives that had diverged completely and yet found a point of connection beyond wealth. Ethan looked healthier, more grounded. His eyes had a steadiness they'd lacked for years. Marcus noticed instantly. Ethan laughed softly when Marcus mentioned it. I used to think being rich would fix me, Ethan said. Turns out losing the money fixed more than having it ever did. Marcus nodded. Money doesn't change who we are, it just turns up the volume. They both fell quiet for a moment, letting the weight of that truth settle. Ethan's journey had not led him back to wealth, but it had led him back to himself, and that, he realised now, was a form of wealth far more stable than the inheritance he once believed was everything. Marcus's journey, meanwhile, had shown him that wealth without purpose is just numbers, and numbers can't fill a life. Purpose can. As they left the restaurant and walked in opposite directions, one toward a modest duplex, one toward a flourishing foundation, it was clear that their lives had become reflections of the choices they made long ago. Two men, same $10 million, two futures carved by two mindsets. And maybe that's the real message this story had been trying to deliver all along. Wealth isn't what sits in your bank account. It's what sits in your mind long enough to shape the person you become. Money can build a future. Money can destroy one. But mindset determines which path you take. And so the story ends where it began, with $10 million. And two men who showed the world that wealth is never what you hold in your hands. It's what you hold inside yourself.